Confirmation that a forced civilian was killed in that attack. As we learn more about the suspect, 52-year-old Khalid Masood was known to police with his criminal record and history of extremist views, but British authorities say there was no intelligence tying him to an imminent plot. The assault bears the hallmarks of what counterterrorism analysts call a marauding attack. That's when an individual who is self-radicalized acts alone or with a small cell and turns everyday items into weapons. These plots are among the hardest to disrupt, and the British trained to quickly neutralize the suspect and limit the loss of life. The British did not go public with the suspect's name until this afternoon, with a former Army intelligence officer telling Fox it's likely part of an investigative strategy.
I totally understood the British government's decision not to release the name of the terrorist because they wanted to arrest the rest of his network before they splashed the name everywhere and the network knew enough to flee. And I think that's what you saw with the overnight raids in Birmingham as they exploited some of the intelligence they received from the attack.
Kurt Cochran from Utah is among the dead, and his wife Melissa seriously injured. The couple celebrating their 25th wedding anniversary when they were mowed down by that SUV on Westminster Bridge. This claim of responsibility today comes from the Amaq news service. This is the ISIS media outlet. They call the 52-year-old a soldier of the Islamic State, though the tweet offers no direct evidence Masood was recruited or trained by ISIS. Bob.
Thank you, Catherine.
You're welcome.
Let me ask you, Eric, yesterday there was sort of left the impression this was a madman who was maybe at ties to ISIS but was acting alone. And overnight they arrest a network of people, which means that this was probably planned out well in advance.
Or may not have been planned out. But the point is, once again, it's another ISIS-inspired attack, whether he was working with ISIS or he was homegrown jihadi that decided he wanted to fight for the cause.
They claimed the attack, though.
Oh, they did. I know they did, but,
exactly.
but they do that a lot. I mean, it's perfect for them. They can create more fear and terror within London. But I just have to do that. I hope it's not too early to do this while we mourn these victims. Again, this was a man who took his car and a knife and ended up killing 4 innocent victims. No gun involved at all. So when you see him here and you have the left coming out all outraged about gun violence, it doesn't really matter. It's not the gun that pulls the trigger. It's the human being that does it. It's not the terrorist. It's not the car or the knife that kills the people. It's the terrorist that does it, as in London.
Well, let me ask you a question, Dan. They had, there was indication that the British knew about this guy. They had followed him for a while, then they let him go. It seems to me this happened last year where they had somebody they were following and then they said to let it go. Is this a failure of the intelligence community, or is it just that we can't follow everybody?
Well, I do think that there's a pattern, Kimberly could correct me if I'm wrong, but that almost all of these terrorist attacks, either here in America or overseas, they've had some brush with the FBI or intelligence community that have looked at them, but there's nothing that they've done where you could detain them. And I imagine that the people that they arrested were probably within that initial contact that he had with the law enforcement and intelligence community. Yep. That that's the network that they had. And maybe those people are innocent, but I would assume that they are there. The thing is, in our Western civilization, you can't detain people because you think they might do something bad in the future. You have to wait until they do something bad. And in this case, what ISIS has inspired is for people to do these types of attacks, especially this mowing down using vehicles. It's very hard to guard against. And you can see why, as a terrorist tactic, it is effective if we let it get to us.
Can't you follow these guys, though? I mean, can't you monitor them, or you don't have to necessarily pick them up?
Yes, well, yes, but again, when you think about the resources, allocation of resources from the intelligence community, we face the same problem here in terms of how many of them can you get after and keep track of, and you can't just preemptively take them in. So you have the situation here, though, which was, what you saw was quick work right after, right? Because they were kind of aware of the guy. Then you had MI5 working with NSA, joint operations, trying to be able to get the information from Telegram and other encrypted devices, text messages, taking this guy's life apart, and then they start framing out and bullet pointing contacts and associates, and they were able to put this together. And as for using these type of things as weapons, I mean, this started out with Al-Qaeda in Inspire magazine back in the 90s saying that this is the type of thing that you could do. And as far as I'm concerned these days, there is no lone wolves. People radicalize in whatever way they can, and ISIS, I think, is correct when they say that they've created a digital caliphate state where they're able to connect and network and radicalize and reach people all over the place, because even the poorest amongst people have cell phones to
Okay,
connect.
they told me to tease, but poor Greg hasn't gotten it. Did you want to say one sentence, Greg?
Goodbye. No,
Kevin Sorbo.
civilization is always going to be at a disadvantage with this. We are always playing catch up. As we harden a soft target, as we plug a hole, terrorists will always find new holes to fill. And the thing is, a failure to fight terror is a failure in diligence, but it's also a failure in imagination. You have to continually think like a terrorist. You have to think about, how do you make something deadly? For example, a box cutter plus a plane created a missile. That never happened before. And the one thing I want to bring up that I fear that we're suffering from I call it visual dysmorphic disorder. And this is this belief that lighting candles and making heart-shaped symbols with your hands is somehow an effective action against evil. And while it's a lovely sentiment and to show support for the people that are suffering, you cannot stop there. You cannot say we go out and we march and we sit down and we light a candle and that's where it ends. And then we start talking about compassion and we start talking about love and we start talking about it. Then we get to Islamophobia and we totally skip the point that I just mentioned, which is hardening soft targets and diligence. We skip that because we're too busy preaching love and kisses.
I'm with that.